Well, good morning all. My name's Georgie Newbery. I'm a flower farmer and florist based between fashionable Bruton and up-and-coming Wincanton. And after last week's enormous, supersized 30-stem challenge, my camera is so wonky, never mind. I thought I'd give you something simpler to do this weekend, if you fancied it. Now, if, like me, you have had a bumper year for honesty, lunaria, then you may find that you've got masses and masses of seed heads, like me. I've got a whole studio full of seed heads, much more than I would normally have, which I'm delighted with because it gives me something to play with during the autumn months, something to make a product with, possibly sell. And so I thought I'd give you an inspiration, just in case you didn't know, for making something out of your lunaria. And I'm going to make a little lunaria wreath with my seed heads. I'm going to keep it as light as a feather. If you enjoy these clips, please do subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, and we'll tell you when we've got more clips coming up. And if any of the tips and tricks I give you coming along during this clip or any of my clips are useful, please do buy me a coffee. The link is in the blurb to all my clips. Right, enough of that. So the first thing is, and often people don't know how this works, to start peeling your honesty seed heads. And I'm going to bring the camera up close to show you. Because you see here we have this lovely silvery, translucent seed head. It's papery, but actually it starts off looking like this. So how are we going to make it go shiny? I'm going to bring my camera closer so you can see. Right, I apologise, I still haven't got my microphone back from my friend Sue at Bluebell Cottage Gardens. It's in the post, so I hope the sound quality is okay. Anyway, here is a stem of lunaria, honesty. And there's a bit of folklore attached to honesty. And people always say, because it's called a money plant, because you can see these little silvery circles look like money. And so people always say, don't give it away, don't put it in bouquets or posies or sell it because you'll lose the money for the house. But I say, because I'm a keen debunker of plant-based myth, I say, if I sell this to someone, then fair exchange is no robbery. So if they give me some money and I put some honesty in their bouquet, then we're quits. I'm not selling my money. I'm exchanging money for money. But equally, if I were making this as a gift, then I would think it was a very generous gift and think like that. Anyway, how do you peel these? You have to peel these. So what I'm going to do, and this is the way I find it's easiest, okay, is if you press your thumb behind the dried seed head, and click, and you just click. And I always do it so that I'm pressing it so that it clicks up from where it's attached to the stem. I'll do it on the other side so you can see. This one, no, it's not going to work. Yeah, there you are. Okay, and you click it and off it comes. And each time you do this, you get a little handful of seeds, which you can save. When you do this, you end up with heaps and heaps of honesty seed. And I don't sell my seed. Lots of people, I've got other people can sell seed. That's their job. I'm not selling seed, but I'm not going to waste seed either. So I'll save all this seed. And I just go and kind of scatter it in the hedgerows around the farm. I scatter it in shady corners where it might take. And as a result, I have little patches of honesty growing wild around the garden, which take me by surprise in the spring and always make me happy. Honesty is a biennial, so when I sow honesty, I sow it in June. So my crop of honesty was sown in June this year, and the seedlings were planted out in September, and they're all this big now. So if I go and scatter this seed around the place, it might take, but it won't flower for 2 years. Which is why it's a real surprise, because I have long forgotten where I put it. Anyway, back to the matter in hand. If you're making a little wreath like this, this is a very, very simple thing to do. And you can make it as light as you like. I'm using raffia because it's light. And also you can see it's sort of the same colour as the stems. So it sort of disappears. Well, if I show you up close, you can see it, but it sort of disappears into the mix. So this is how I'll show you how I start. First of all, I take clean stems, quickly clean the stems. This is a very satisfactory job that you can do sort of sitting for long periods of time in front of the telly in the evenings. All around the world, flower farmers at one point in the year or another spend evenings peeling their honesty seed heads in front of the telly. So all you have to do is take, Tea Cake's whining, Tea Cake is my border terrier. Take your stems of honesty, and you can see they sort of have a natural curl to them. So I'm not going to fight that curl, I'm going to allow it to happen. And I add one stem after another, very gently, so that I'm making a long stem. It's like making a garland. And I'll take a piece of raffia, and I could split the raffia so it's finer. And I'm going to tie. This couldn't be much simpler as a little crafty activity to do on a Saturday morning. So hopefully you'll all enjoy having a go. If you haven't got any honesty seed heads, then ask at your local florist, or see if you've got a local flower farmer who might be able to sell you some. Or they may be busy making wreaths. Obviously these go really well in Christmas wreaths as well. You can see the Christmassy sparkle to them. And if you come on any of my Christmas decorations, wreath making or tablescaping workshops, I will be using these in the mix. But this is a lovely, simple way to start. So once you've tied your stems together, then you very simply wind your raffia around each stem. And once you've done it once or twice, so that's nice and firm, they're not going to fall apart, you can add more stems. So I'm actually going to add these to the stem I've already started. Waste not, want not. So I'm going to take some new ones and show you how I go. I'm going to have to turn you off to make some new ones. The skill when doing this is to hang up your seed heads really quite soon after they've developed. So these have been hanging in the studio since July time. And wait until they're really, really dry before you start peeling. If you try and peel these when there's even the slightest bit of moisture, then they're really hard to peel. It's much better to wait until they're absolutely dry as dry before you start doing this. And then it's quite quick and quite zen. If you're ever buying stems of silvery orbs like this, and you think, gosh, they're expensive, then do remember that each individual stem has been peeled by hand. This is not a job that could ever be done by a machine. So I've got my little beginning garland that I showed you at the beginning, and I'm just going to start adding on material. So there's the garland, and as I add each stem, I will look for the natural curve so that this has a natural curve to it, and I'll work with that natural curve. I won't argue with it. Never argue with plant material. Big lesson my mother taught me. Never argue with a flower because you've already lost. They don't play your game necessarily. It is worth winding your raffia around relatively often, because what you don't want when you eventually turn this into a circle is a lot of bits sticking out. You see how there's a bit of sticky out there? I'm going to have to be careful with that. You may end up cutting off some ends, but this is so light. I mean, it weighs nothing. So when you're cutting bits off, it won't break because it's not relying on tension to make a circle. Unlike when I make my willow wreaths for Christmas, they are very much relying on tension to keep their circle. Whereas this is just going to do what I tell it to an extent. So long as I don't crack it. You've got to be gentle with, look at that, that's fantastic, isn't it? You've got to be very gentle with material like this because it breaks easily. It's delicate. And this is quite a, so long as you don't rush it. That's with anything like this. It's when people talk about mindfulness, they talk about having to slow down and think. I read a lovely article recently by a lady called Bhupinder Sohanpal, I think, and she had a stroke. She was a lawyer, and she had a stroke, which kind of knocked her out and certainly readjusted her expectations of life, the universe, and what she was going to do on a daily basis. And as part of her recovery, she took up gardening and she started volunteering at the Royal Horticultural Society's garden at Wisley. And she said that, and she learned all about gardening and became very inspired to take up gardening. Excellent, good girl. But what I loved about the piece was she said one of the things that she really learned to love most was weeding. Because it's a slow and thoughtful process. You achieve a great deal in quite a short time. It's not creative, but it's just you work away and suddenly there's a beautiful clean bed and all the plants that you want to be there can flourish. All the little untidiness is gone. So she's discovered a love of weeding. And this is a very similar, it's not weeding obviously, but it's a slow, methodical, repetitive business, at the end of which you'll have something quite pretty. So look, we're getting there. It's making a very nice, it's making a nice shape. And I'm just going to carry on, windy, windy, windy. And what I'm looking for eventually, I am making a wreath, but it also occurs to me that this weekend, in the next few days, it is Halloween. And Halloween stands for All Hallows Eve. Halloween is an ancient way of describing an evening. And All Hallows Eve, all the ghosts and ghoulies and long-leggedy beasties and things that gang womp in the night come out to haunt us, don't they? Which is all fine and dandy. And I appreciate that Halloween is a big deal and people really enjoy it. However, I think rather forgotten is the 1st of November is All Saints' Day. And so people spend a great deal of time having fun for Halloween and slightly forget that All Saints' Day comes after All Hallows Eve. And on All Saints' Day, we remember the people we loved, but who are gone from us. And, you know, in some parts of the world, people go to look at, physically go to the graveside of their ancestors. and friends and family members and people they've loved, and remember them, physically remember them. So this is something that you could really have for All Saints' Day. Now look, isn't that pretty? And I'm going to turn it into a halo. And I'm going to, it is about the size, it's a little bit big for my head, but you can see how it's got, its natural curve is there. It's got no wire in it. I haven't wired it. I'm really very pleased with that. And look, it's a halo. So I'm going to finish it off, and I'll show you. By finishing it off is really simple. Look, I've made a nice curve, and I'm going to go round, and I've got the end of my raffia here, and I'm going to tie it all together. Here's my raffia. It's worth being careful not to squash your little silver dollars, if you think of them like that, at this stage. And because I have got, look, I've got a sort of a spurt of twig, I'm going to carry on round a little bit, because that will encourage it to keep it more circular. But I'm not doing anything fiddly. Well, it is a little bit fiddly, but it's not complicated. I'm not using wire. I'm going to cut off this sticking out piece of twig. I'm going to split the raffia. And I can tie a knot. It's just a really ordinary wreath knot. And snip the ends off because it's tidy. I'm always being tidy. And there is a little silver dollar wreath, which for All Saints' Day is a very pretty thing. It's a halo. I'm not going to wear it as a halo, of course I'm not. But if you have small children who are going into school, or if you're doing anything for Halloween, then maybe actually, shall we have some saints' halos as opposed to all the scary bit? Just something different to do. And if I hang this on the wall, I'll show you what it looks like. Now I know this is not the perfect place. It's quite well lit, and you can see what I'm doing. So I've hung it up here. I'm going to hang it somewhere better in a minute so I can take a nice picture. But this is a good way to show you what I'm doing. So I've hung it up. It's a really sweet little circle. I could have carried on and on, but I'm conscious I didn't want to make a clip that was 4.5 hours long. So I could make a much bigger one, but that's rather pretty as it is. When you've made it and you've hung it up, you think, actually, I'd like to fatten it up a little bit. I've got some little extra bits, and you can just tuck them in. And that way, if you've got anywhere that you feel as though you can see the raffia, or you can see some of your workings, this is not your maths homework, you do not need to see your workings, then you can cover them up. Cover them up by tucking in a little bit more of your Honesty seed heads. And even if somebody's going to wear this as a crown or a halo, imagine Advent play, you know, the school play at Christmas with the little children being angels. Or you could make angels' wings out of this. They still won't fall apart because they're quite crunchy and they hold everything in there. That's such a lovely light. They hold together really nicely. So if you made a little one that was going to be on a 5-year-old's head as an angel's halo, for the nativity play. Wouldn't that be hilarious? Anyway, but also it hangs up really, really nicely like that. Go on, have a go. I bet you've got some honesty seed heads lying around, hanging up somewhere, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I've got a lot of them. What am I going to do? That's how you can turn them into a really simple wreath. Thanks very much for coming along. Have a lovely weekend. Happy Halloween. And let's all remember all our saints. I love all the hymns that go with for all the saints who from their labours rest, and so on. That's for the people we remember on the 1st of November. Anyway, have a lovely weekend, everybody, and I'll see you very soon. Please do remember, subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, and we'll tell you when we've got more clips coming up. And if any of the tips and tricks have been useful, or you would just like to support the channel, please do buy me a coffee. The link to coffee buying is in the blurb to all my clips. I'm going to play Angels all day. There, I've hung it on, I think it's a sheep's skull that my son must have picked up on a walk one day, probably in Scotland or in Cumbria where my parents live, and which hangs by the back door. And so I've hung it on that. So it's quite Halloween-y or All Saints-y, depending on your mood.